My older brother Sean came home from one of his deployments overseas and decided to take me out camping. Sean's girlfriend had dumped him, which was a bad situation, so he was looking to get his mind off of things. Sean is older than me by about 12 years, which is an obvious disconnect, but he's done a good job staying in touch and being a part of my life. I do have other siblings, but they've moved on, and I seldomly see them every year or so. Sean picked me up from school on Wednesday in his big old blue diesel truck. In the front seat, he had a wrinkled bag of McDonald's, and the truck bed was full of camping gear. I opened the slightly rusted passenger side door and hopped in. He greeted me with a smile and handed me the small bag of food, while blaring some type of rock and roll music. "Ready to go, L-Bug?" he said excitedly. Ladybug was my nickname growing up, since I'd always wear this ladybug dress, but Sean called me L-Bug for short. Only Sean called me L-Bug, which I thought was really cool. I gave Sean a wide smile and nodded excitedly. We left the school parking lot and made our way off into the country where Sean was going to teach me how to fish. Apparently, there was this secret fishing hole where he and his friends would go to catch all of these incredible fish that no one knew about. "You're lucky I don't blindfold you," he said jokingly. "People kill for fishing spots like this." Being young and gullible, my eyes widened at the thought of people actually killing someone for a fishing spot. Sean, seeing my clear discomfort, told me not to worry, and that he was only kidding. The drive wasn't terribly far, but the scenery had completely changed from the suburban neighborhood community that I knew all my life to the lively woodlands that were so foreign to me. "How did you find this place?" I asked Sean, while still scarfing down my food. "Oh, Uncle Brian would take me here to have target practice. Which reminds me," he said with a grin while pointing to the bed of the truck. In the back, I could see your typical camping equipment, but two strangely shaped bags that looked similar to guitar cases. I could only assume that those were guns of some kind, but I wasn't sure. We eventually pulled off into the woods and started driving on a dirt road, surrounded by woods. About 10 minutes driving on this dirt road, we arrived at a large dirt mound with a wooden sawhorse on top, with a cardboard sign that said "closed" on it. "Aw, dang," I said disappointedly, as this was clearly where we were going to go for the fishing spot. Sean looked around as if he was trying to see if anyone else was around, which there clearly wasn't anyone, and told me to hop out of the truck and move the sign. I looked at Sean confused, since I had no idea if he was joking or if he was being serious. The devilish grin didn't help, but I hopped out anyways. I moved the wooden sawhorse, which was actually kind of heavy, just enough to where he could drive the truck up and over the dirt mound. The diesel truck made light work of the rather inconvenient obstacle, and sure enough, cleared the mound in one attempt. I was about to hop back into the truck when he told me to move the sign back where it was. That way, no one else would be following us, unless they did what we did, obviously. I moved the sign back and hopped back into the truck, and made off for the hidden fishing spot deep within the woods. After 15 minutes or so of driving in unkept areas of the forest, we soon came to an area that looked clear enough to come and park the truck. The daylight was still pretty strong, but soon would be fading within a few hours, so we had to hurry and get camp set up before we could go fish. My brother, being a paranoid one, placed a camo-colored tarp on the truck to conceal anyone from our spot. We didn't bother with the fire quite yet, since we wanted to go fish before the sun would go down. We set up our tent quickly and threw our sleeping bags inside. Before we knew it, we were on our way down to the secret fishing spot that my brother was so eager to show me. Despite the secret fishing spot historically being great for yielding large fish, this particular time didn't repeat past results, and not for lack of effort, mind you. We didn't catch anything in the 2 hours we spent fishing in that spot. Even though nothing was accomplished and the fish weren't biting, my brother and I still had a great conversation about a lot of things. We hiked back in the darkening evening, empty-handed, and started a small fire in the makeshift fire pit, and started cooking our hobo dinners. We kept the fire small just in case there happened to be someone out in the woods that would report us to the police for whatever reason. The dinners were not exactly fine dining, but they did their jobs, and we sat by the fire with full bellies. My brother Sean shared with me a couple of war stories which were both cool and terrifying at the same time. He got out one of his guns and just showed me some of the cool features about it, but we didn't fire it. The gun he showed me was some type of machine gun that looked quite complex. Sean made sure it was unloaded before handing me the gun to get a feel for it. The gun was heavy and felt awkward in my hands. I could only imagine having to carry this all over and firing it at people with similar weapons. I handed it back, thankful that I was not in combat. We let the fire die down and told more stories to one another before we called it a night. The night was not terribly cold, but it was cooler during the evening than it was during the day. We got into the tent and I just laid on top of my sleeping bag and sleep eventually found me. I only got a couple hours of sleep before I felt a gentle nudge waking me up. My brother was shaking my foot while peering outside the tent. "Do you hear that?" he said in a whisper. My ears strained to hear any sound, and sure enough, I did. It didn't take long for me to hear the screams of the woman to reach my ears. The screams sent shivers down my spine, despite being off in the distance somewhere. We both looked outside the tent in the distance, and we saw what looked like a couple of torches, not too far off into the trees. The night was much cooler now. I could see my breath and I was shivering. I put on a light jacket and wrapped a scarf around most of my face. My brother had a camo jacket and was holding one of the rifles from earlier in his right hand. "Elbug, hang tight. I'm gonna go check this out. Get ready to leave soon." Sean then left me in the tent by myself while he went to investigate the nefarious activities, taking place only a few hundred yards away. I started to pack up but then felt this urge to follow behind Sean, despite what he told me to do. Sean was practically sprinting without a flashlight towards the torches that seemed to be going up this hill. We would have been okay if we just ignored them, but the screams for help were ones that Sean and I just could not ignore. Sean was much faster than I was. Thankfully, the torches were moving at a walking pace, so it took him little to no time to close the gap and keep a safe distance while also keeping an eye on them. I wanted to make sure that Sean wouldn't find me if he turned back, so I also made sure to keep a safe buffer between he and I, but I also watched to see what was unfolding in front of us. When I finally stopped some yards behind Sean, I could see a couple dozen men wearing blue cloaks with white masks. They were all holding torches in one hand while carrying various types of sharp weapons in the other, all except for one. The person not holding a weapon was pulling someone with a leash, much like you would a dog that doesn't want to follow you. The person that they were dragging along was wearing some type of white dress. They were blindfolded and wailing as if that they knew that their fate was sealed. We followed them for a small distance when they arrived at an old covered well and stopped. The woman continued to weep when some of the cloaked people started to remove the heavy circular stone that was on top of the well. Sean aimed his weapon at the people and emerged from the tree line and started shouting. "Let her go," he shouted in a commanding tone. All of the people there, including the wailing woman, stopped what they were doing and looked at Sean. Sean got closer to the group and demanded that they cut her ties. "We cannot do that. This isn't a real person. You have to trust us," said one of the people holding a large knife to the woman's throat. Sean flipped some buttons on his gun and shot off 2 rounds near the people's feet. The woman that was blindfolded jumped, but no one else did. They just continued to stare an icy cold stare at Sean, completely unfazed. You could tell that something wasn't right about these people. Rather than letting the woman go, the majority of the group began to slowly walk towards Sean, weapons in hand, completely unafraid of his gun. The people were getting too close to Sean and he had no choice but to fire at them. This caused instant chaos amongst everyone. Despite having a weapon, the people in the ropes were too many and quickly jumped Sean. Sean was able to hit most of them, but not all. 2 people ended up wrestling Sean for his gun. The one person holding the bound woman started to stab her viciously and dragged her over to the well. The 2 people were able to disarm Sean and started to drag him to the well also. Sean's gun laid only 20 yards away from me. I knew I needed to help, but I was so afraid. My body seemed to have acted on its own. After a quick sprint, the next thing I knew, I was holding the heavy gun and pointing at the people that had my brother. "Hey, let him go!" I shouted with all I had. The people still wrestling Sean were too busy and didn't even respond. I was left with no choice and fired the remaining bullets in the direction of the people. Sean laid on the ground covering his head as the people around him fell in agony. The gun jumped so much that I was certain that I had just killed everyone. Thankfully, Sean was able to get up and fight the last person that I managed to not kill and subdue them. The woman laid near the well, bleeding from all the stab wounds. Her attacker fell victim to the barrage of bullets that I had sent their way. "Don't let her see your face," the last cloaked man said. Sean struck the man a few times in the face, causing his mask to fall off. The man was unconscious, and we both ran over to the woman that was surely going to die. We cut her ties and applied pressure to the woman's wounds on her abdomen. The woman took the blindfold off, revealing these large black eyes. She looked at Sean perplexed rather than agony, and smiled. Her smile revealed multiple rows of sharp teeth. Sean stopped almost instantly what he was doing, and stood upright with his arms by his side. She stood in front of him, revealing large claws on her hand, and began to laugh. I stood mystified at what was going on. She then grasped his neck tightly, removing most of the flesh on his throat. The scene was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The amount of blood that resulted from this action told me that he had died before he hit the ground. The woman smiled and looked over at me. I was still holding the gun, but whenever I pulled the trigger, nothing happened. Instead, I stood in fear as the woman looked into my eyes. Rather than her grabbing my throat and removing it, she looked confused at me, as if I was something that she'd never seen before. She tried grabbing the scarf that covered my face, but I pressed my hands to it to prevent her from seeing my face. The woman then looked past me and saw all the bodies that laid behind me. She instantly went to the man whose mask had fallen off and repeated the same action she did to my brother. For whatever reason, I knew that having my face concealed is what prevented that woman from killing me. She was preoccupied from killing the rest of the people that she didn't notice me running away. I ran back in the dark to our tent and looked for the keys to the truck. I didn't know how to drive stick, so it was pointless. I just stayed in the tent until daytime came, since running around in the dark would be pointless since I didn't know where I was going. Daytime came and I made sure to keep my scarf on. I followed the trail that my brother and I took and made it back to the main dirt road, which eventually led to a campsite with a family there. I told them what had happened and they took me into town with their whole family. The police got involved, but unbelievably, no body was ever found. I told them about the woman and the people in the cloaks, but they didn't seem to believe me. My parents think that something else happened and I made this up to cope with the trauma from all of it, but deep down, I know the truth of what had happened in those woods.